What is going on? Welcome back to Jiu-Jitsu Outlet. I am sitting here with Zach Even-Esh. Zach, you are one of the best mentors I've ever had when it comes to strength and conditioning, mindset, and it's an honor to have you here on the podcast. For people who don't know, Zach is a legend in strength and conditioning. You're one of the best strength coaches in the world, in my opinion, especially when it comes to training young kids, training high schoolers and young adults, basically. And you work with a lot of wrestlers. And I know that right now you just recently
Yeah.
started coaching at a local high school. And I want to get into that a little bit on the podcast. But we were talking about it before the show. You're also the author of the encyclopedia of the underground strength and conditioning. And man, this book is badass for people who haven't read it. So definitely, if you haven't looked at Zach's book, I'm going to put a link down below. Amazing book, very large book. And Zach, it's an honor to have you here,
I don't
man.
know if
Thanks for coming on
great
the
to be
show.
here. I don't know if they're going to be able to find the book
Really? Is it on Amazon right now?
because, yeah, usually for like $200.
Bro,
It's like a $40 book. So,
it's
I
worth
was
it.
telling you, listen, my Marty Gallagher said, well, hey, he's like, they should pay $200. They missed out on it when it was $40. When I finish this next book I'm on, I'll go back, uh, fix up that book and get it on Amazon self-publishing, and it'll probably be a $40 or $50 book. So it's been, missing in action from print for a couple of years now. And you're mentioning like jujitsu and wrestling. I've got like books like catch wrestling books from like early 1900s, and I used to purchase a lot of the old stuff in like the early 2000s, and now back then I did it because I am not just a collector and then flipping it and whatnot. Like, I love that stuff. Now people, buy used vintage weights and like resell it, and it's like their own business. For me, I'm like, dude, I use that stuff. I'm not just collecting it and getting rid of it. So I've got some of the old wrestling books. One of my favorites is from before I was born, written in 1974. It's called the John Jesse Encyclopedia of Wrestling Physical Conditioning. And it's got sandbag training, all kinds of like, they didn't have kettlebells. They had the swing bell, which I think York Barbell was making it. It's basically like a small handle with weights on it, and you swing it. Um, all kinds of calisthenics and barbell exercises, and just the book. You're like, man, this guy was doing. He was underground strength before I was born. Sandbag training was amazing, and I think the guy John Jesse picked up on that from like wrestlers in other countries. They were doing, they were very strong, and they were utilizing training methods beyond the barbell. I don't think strength and conditioning didn't really like hit home to the athletic world in America until the late 90s.
Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? And
Crazy.
I've seen a lot of people. I got to live in Poland for a couple years and train with those guys. And they are some badasses, man. They train hard. Like we would go out every single Saturday to the woods and run around in the woods. We'd do push-ups, we'd run hills, we do like old school kind of like Rocky style training. And my jujitsu
Yes.
coach was this Polish guy, and he would just say like it's super important to do this at least once a week, just to get out and do something different and do something that's like physically challenging. And he said it brings everyone together as a team to go out and do that. And you got a lot of experience with this kind of stuff, man. And I just want to ask you, like, when you put yourself through this kind of training, or you put kids through this kind of training, what effect does it have on their mental health? What do you see? How does it shape them, as they develop?
It's so interesting because what you were talking about, Paul, is like today, that's the wrong training. They ran for distance, or they didn't do plyometric training first. And the problem is that training today is so perfect, it doesn't prepare anybody mentally or emotionally for the imperfections, not just of sports, but life, meaning people fold today under minimal pressure. And it's because everything we do, whether it's strength and conditioning, going to school, oh, it's cold, it's raining, don't go outside. We avoid anything that's uncomfortable. And so in life, especially in America, we crumble under pressure. And, this past summer, I was with my daughter traveling for tennis, and we were down in Georgia in late July, very hot. It must have been like 105 degrees on the court. The courts, the heat goes up. It was in the like upper 90s. She had a tennis match that lasted 3 hours and 15 minutes. And the girl she was playing, I was like, I thought she was going to quit. When they went into overtime, she had like a towel draped over her head. She was hunched over. In the middle of the match, she took a bathroom break. She was gone for like 10 minutes. I think there's a 3-minute limit, but she took this long bathroom break. Then the trainer came out during overtime. I thought they were going to make her medically forfeit. Well, long story short, my daughter wins. It's 3 hours, 15 minutes. Like, I mean, I don't even know how you train for that, right? What training program prepares somebody for 3 hours and 15 minutes? Then, like later, I hear her talking with her parents and they have an accent. And I say, there you go. She's, an immigrant. She's not from America. They don't quit. In America, my knee hurts, my ankle hurts, like it's over. And then the doctor's like, don't do anything for the next 7 years. You hurt your thumb. And that's the problem in too much stuff in America is we want to put a band-aid on everything with a pill or with doing nothing. Whereas, think about this. Donnie Thompson said this to me. Donnie Thompson, I don't know if you follow him. He invented the fat bells and body tempering. Do you know him? He does amazing.
I'll have to look him up. Donnie Thompson.
Yep.
Okay.
Look him up on Instagram and YouTube. But he said something interesting about like, hey, what if a farmer injured his back? Does the farmer now sit on his couch for 6 months? Or does he go back out the next day, get on the tractor, drives the tractor, sees a rock, a stone, and has to get out and move it? And how does he rehab himself? Through movement, through activity. And that develops resiliency. And, the question you ask, like if you ask Joe DeSantis, he said the reason why Spartan race it originally started was like for people to do some sort of like a crazy physical challenge. But then as Spartan started becoming like national and global, he said people were contacting him or seeing him at races saying, you saved my life. I was suicidal, or I was, I was drinking myself to death, or I was, addicted to drugs, or my marriage was going to end. And what saved them? What saved their relationship? What saved their health? What saved their life? Doing hard shit, because he says it changes your frame of reference. You're like, yeah, I already did 100 burpees today, or I already did a cold shower. Like this struggle I'm having in my business now doesn't like negatively impact me. And I've noticed a tremendous decline in the resiliency of the athletes I train, before 2012 versus after 2012. And if we ask why, it's because the phone, my smartphone's over, my iPhone's here, the phone. They're distracted, they're less active, and they do less hard shit. And coaches can't push kids hard because then you get fired. And that's the unfortunate truth. And let me tell you, if you want to win, you're a jiu-jitsu competitor. You have to train hard. Louis Simmons said, to master Kung Fu, the training must be severe. And I love that quote because when I was a kid, I think I'm 20 years older than you, Paul. I'm almost 47. We would see these old martial arts movies and you'd see them training, and it wasn't fake stuff. You'd see them like doing plyometric jumps up like massive flights of stairs, walking on their hands, like long distance running, and wheelbarrow walks upstairs. You saw severe training. And guess what we did as kids? We tried to copy it. Now we want to protect everybody and don't do this and don't do that. And the kids I train are weaker than ever before, infinitely weaker than ever before.
On your podcast lately, you've talked about nutrition a lot. And I really liked your interview with Pat Miletich. And I've listened to it, I think, twice. I'm trying to get him on this podcast, but I want to talk about that kind of stuff with him. But I'm going to put the link down below for anyone who hasn't listened yet. But in that podcast, you talk about some pretty revealing stuff about basically the long and short of it is that the food that we have is not actual food. It's malnutrition. Like, it doesn't have the proper vitamins. So it goes beyond just, buy good stuff at the grocery store, because the grocery store stuff wasn't grown properly. The farmer didn't know how to take care of the beef. They didn't know how to grow the vegetables properly. They didn't have proper soil, and there isn't the right vitamins and minerals. And you've talked a lot about what you're doing to kind of combat this. So I was wondering if you could just kind of share some of that information. Like, what are you doing these days to get your family and yourself the proper nutrition that you guys need?
Right. So about a year ago, we started purchasing our beef from a farm in Pennsylvania, about 90 minutes away, a Mennonite farmer. So I think that's like a type of Amish farmer. And it's a massive property. The cattle are constantly being moved from like different parts to graze differently. And that's the difference then compared to the cows or the beef that I'll purchase from a supermarket. They're just being, injected with hormones. They don't have freedom. They don't get to move around. So they're not healthy. And so I think Pat said something like, it's not you are what you eat. You are what the food you eat is eating. So what if you eat eggs, but those chickens are fed all kinds of grains and corn and stuff like that? Well, now you're eating, eggs that are not, high quality. And so I think, being realistic in this case, people who have a lot more money than me and more, I guess, free, they have free time like during the day to tend to animals. They've got chickens in their backyard, they've got pigs, things like that. They're raising their own actual animals. So me, I have to drive and go and do those things. And then I go to a local, 10, 12 minutes away. To these people that have free range chickens running all around their house, and I go buy eggs from them. So I also looked at, you mentioned I'm in a high school. I've been there 3 years. I've said this and not like in a way of making fun of kids, but the boys, have acquired almost like feminine physical traits. They have boobs, right? Boys have boobs. They have large hips. They have a lot of body fat. They're not strong. And it's because of the poison food. It's the crap that they eat. They're eating, majority processed food, things that are coming in a bag or like, pre-made. And they don't do any challenging physical activity. And physical education in the school is viewed as like a bad thing. Oh, no, I have to do sweating. That's bad. No, those things are great. And breakfast is usually skipped, or it's like, some sort of like a fake waffle. Then they buy school lunch. Then they go home and eat maybe a candy bar or something else that's in a wrapper. And then dinner is probably heavy in carbohydrates. And now you combine that with a lack of strength activity. It's a recipe for massive like health problems, cancer, and early onset of disease. And it's not looking good. It's a massive problem. You mentioned Poland. You'll see like in Poland, I'm sure all around the world we have problems, right? We have fat people, obese people, lazy people. We have that everywhere. But America is leading. They are leading the weakness. And I think I looked up obesity rates amongst teenagers, and I think it's doubled either in the past 10 years or the past 20 years. I can't remember if it was from '02 or 2012, but obesity has doubled amongst like the teenage population in 10 years. How crazy is that?
It's insane. It's insane. So I was able to live over in Europe for 3 years when I was in the military, and their food is grown different and it tastes completely different. And the big reason is because a lot of the stuff that we put into our food to preserve it, a lot of these preservatives in quotation marks, it's illegal to do that over in places like Germany. And they think we're crazy. They think we're absolutely nuts. If you ask them, they're like, you guys don't know how to take care of your food. It's like, what are you doing? If you go to the grocery store in Germany, the apples look different. They look kind of like what we call here like crab apples, apples that you would just pick fresh off of a tree. They're not shiny. Like our apples look
Yeah.
like someone polished them with shoe polish. And their pears look different. Their pears look like some shriveled up nasty pear, but you take a bite of it and it's the greatest fruit you've ever had because it's real. It's just picked off of a tree and it goes rotten within 3 days. That's a big part of it. Food over in Europe, you're going to have to go to the grocery store a lot more often because the food goes bad after 3 or 4 days because there isn't all these preservatives in it. But if you get food here, we have eggs that stay good for 2 weeks, or like we have vegetables
Yeah.
that stay good for a month. Like it's not real food is kind of what we're getting at here. So yeah, it's super important. Like I feel like it's critical. I feel like there's so much stuff that we're feeding ourselves that we're giving to the next generation. So I guess if there's someone listening to this and they're picking up what we're putting down and they're seeing the importance of nutrition, what
Yeah.
would you encourage that they look into, in their local area?
Yeah, I would look for find some local farms and see what kind of food you can pick up from there, whether it's the vegetables, like for example, a couple weeks ago we were near where my daughter was having a tennis tournament and there was a farm down the street and they were selling pumpkins. And I asked them if they had raw honey, and they had raw honey, and they also had vegetables out. And I was like, "Oh, where is your farm?" And their house was right next door, and they had all these trees up. They're like, "My farm's right there." So like you can see where it's coming from, and that's what was cool about that farmer I went to in Pennsylvania. His house is on the farm. I mean, the land went further than what the eyes could see. So Marty Gallagher always said, get to know your local butcher. Hey, get to know a local farmer. And in New Jersey, you'd think, oh, there's no farms. Um, you could travel to Pennsylvania within an hour and get and find farms. And so there's also a website. This is what's interesting. I had the food like they do like drop locations where I got raw honey, raw cheese, different cuts of beef. And it was when I was talking with Pat and I was Googling like the raw milk. And you place an order a few days out, and every other week, every 2 weeks, they do a drop. And I went to this person's house 10 minutes away, and there must have been 20 coolers outside. And basically, after make the purchase, after you pick up your stuff, you drop off that cooler at the person's house and then they come back and pick up the cooler and next time they have other coolers for you so you could get the food delivered. But I think it's great to just go and get in the car and travel and start getting food that's I don't want to say the word organically but naturally raised, and just start to remove stuff that is poison. At my school, it's sad to see it, but our athletic trainer sells candy after school, and all these kids are buying muffins and Pop Tarts. And I'm like, man, like I tell the kids every day at home the night before, pack another sandwich. How long does it take for you to make a turkey sandwich? 30 seconds, right? 30 seconds. And so it comes down to also some like discipline, and people lack discipline. Going back to your first question, like what does doing hard, challenging things do for the mind, for your mental and emotional health? You get strong and you start wanting to make better decisions. But if you always do what's convenient with your food, those easy choices lead to a hard life. We're going to see this younger generation getting sick much earlier than the generation of like our grandparents. And
Yeah, man.
that's the sad thing.
So I wanted to ask you about this. This is a question I had written down, and I think this is a perfect setup for it, what you just said. So you just threw me like a great pitch for my question that I'm about to give. So I'm about to knock it on back to you. But so where's the line for this? Because I think that it's very difficult to ascertain, like if you have a kid that is maybe your own child or maybe someone that you're mentoring or coaching or something like that. And you might know, like you being the older generation, obviously, I feel like every older generation always thinks the generation after it is weak. Like our grandparents' generation is like, you guys are a bunch
That's right.
of weak pussies, and we're it's a lot of times saying kind of the same stuff. So where's the line? Because on the one hand, you don't want to push them so hard that they resent it and that they hate going to training and they feel like it's something you're forcing them to do. Because honestly, that's how I felt. Like when I was a kid growing up, my dad would try to get me to go to judo practice because he was a judo black belt. And eventually I was like, Dad, I don't want to go to judo. Like I don't like being forced to do anything. And then later in life, I got
Yeah.
back into it on my own, but I had to go and
Yes.
do it. Whenever my dad was making me go, I hated it. I was like, oh, fuck this. My dad's
Yeah.
making me do it. So where's that line? I guess where's the line between we got to have good discipline, we've got to do X, Y, and Z, but also we don't want them to feel like, oh my God, I've got to just do whatever slave driver dad says, because
Yeah.
that's the deal. And the other
Teenagers,
thing too is you
no
don't want to
doubt.
be that parent who's like, oh, I'm do this because you know it's right and I'm the parent. Like I don't like the reason just being, oh, I'm the authority. Like that's not a good reason.
That
So
doesn't work.
what
Yeah,
is
that doesn't
the
work.
best answer here,
You're
man?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the best answer, but I know, my kids always saw me and my wife exercising. They of course saw me doing a lot of training because that's what I live for. So they just thought it was normal. They were babies and they would see me training in the garage. They'd see me sprinting up and down the street. They'd see me doing like jumps on and off the stairs, pushing the truck. Like when my dad is pushing a truck. So I don't expect parents to do what I'm doing, but if mom and dad are riding their bike and going out and exercising and being active, kids see that as normal activity. Number two, kids, like you said, they don't want nobody. I don't think whether it's kids or adults, they don't want to really be fully told what to do, but especially teenagers, they're finding themselves, so they want some freedom to make choices. So what's interesting is like I train the football team, and I'm training the freshmen. And as I've taught them how to train and I've taught them more exercises, a lot of times what we do is we do 3 exercises, and I have it like block 1 is 3 exercises, block 2 is 3 exercises. So I'll have a team on block 1, another team on block 2. Sometimes I'll say, here's exercise 1, here's exercise 2, exercise 3 is whatever you want. Like, I don't care if it's curls, tricep push downs. I give them freedom and they like that. It's exciting to do what they want to do. And, I was mentioning those freshman football players, they come in during their lunch block, which is like 20 minutes. So they do 2 rounds of calisthenics. And let's say, for example, today I said you're going to do overhead dumbbell presses, you're going to do chest supported row. Third exercise, your choice. Some kids were benching, some kids were curling, some kids were squatting, and they squatted yesterday. So it's interesting to see some of them choose the hardest things to do, and they will surprise you. So you want freedom to make choices, and that's part of like health education, is to not force anything upon people. But hey, here's information. Let's do some research and what might be, what is a negative outcome, what's a positive outcome. Now you have to make the decision. That's the real empowering way. And the last thing I'd like to say is, if training is too hard, it will discourage people, whether it's an adult or a younger kid. And so I learned this in my early days, from Coach Ethan Reeve. He always said, you want to like finish a training session with athletes with energy in the tank. He's like, that way they want to come back, or they go and do their own extra. He's like, because that's like champion training, doing your own work without a coach. And so I always have freedom and flexibility built into each training session, with the opportunity for them to leave, and have energy in the tank and not feel like they have to get destroyed, because it builds consistency, which is more important than intensity done for short periods.
I like that. And I feel like that's just to highlight two things that you kind of said. If I'm hearing you right, it's almost like with your own kids, lead by example. Don't just tell them what to do.
Yep.
Don't just be that authority that's like, oh, do this, and I'm over here, drinking my coffee and eating my donuts. You're working out. It's got to be, oh, I'm working out, and if you want to hang out with dad, this is just what we're doing. Just come on, and this is just what we do. And back to nutrition, I've heard you say this on your podcast, like, just don't buy bad food. If there's no bad food in the house, then the kid won't have any bad food, and they'll just grow up eating right, because that's the only food that was in the house. So what else are they going to do? And so I think that's great. That's very simple advice. But then also, like, if you are programming, if you are in that kind of role as a coach, like, program in some freedom. Basically, I love that. It's almost like planned spontaneity or something. You want to give people that freedom so they don't feel locked in. I feel like that's a great tip too for jiu-jitsu instructors, or wrestling coaches. Like, allow them to work on their favorite takedown, or their favorite armbar setup. Don't just keep it like, oh, this is what we're doing.
Check this out.
Yeah, go, please.
On Wednesdays, we started doing this during like COVID, or near the end of COVID, because I had to furlough my coaches. So it was just me. And one day I was like, man, I'm so sick of running this warm up. Like, I felt like I lost my creativity. So I said, all right, this group, you organize the warm up. They did their own warm up. It was fucking awesome. They were doing like buddy carries, piggyback riding. They started playing dodgeball with medicine balls. They were going nuts. I was like, this is great. It worked great. The next group came in. I let them create their own warm up, and then I let them create their entire workout. So we call it Wacky Wednesday. And it might make zero sense. They might do like benching, superset with curls, superset with, landmine shoulder presses. All of that is, quote unquote, technically wrong, scientifically wrong. But you know what? They're working hard. They're training in an imperfect scenario, which is actually very beneficial for sport. And I've gotten, I think, too smart sometimes. And I make everything too perfect, which is the antithesis to competition, where nothing goes perfectly. And so on Wednesdays, 9 out of 10 Wednesdays, I let them create the workout on Wacky Wednesday. With like my athletes at the high school, we do 45-minute training sessions. The last 5 to 7 minutes, I say free time. You could do arms, you could do abs, you could do machine work. It don't matter, and they're young. So if they want to do curls 3 days a week, nobody's overtraining, you know what I'm saying? But they love that freedom. And it's also empowering, because they do something on their own. They're learning how to do it versus being coached all the time.
Man, that's such a great point. So many nuggets in there. And man, I've taken a ton of notes just listening to you talk. But I know we do got to wrap this up. We're gonna have to get you back for a part 2 sometime. But just to wrap this up, Zach, is there anything that you want to close on? And just let us know anything you got going on right now, anything you're promoting or anything you're doing. I know you've got a couple of different certifications that people can check out. Just tell us a little bit more about what you're thinking about these days.
I think I try to really direct everybody to my newsletter, because it's like I'll share training information, motivation, nutrition, training for life. So that's zachstrength.com. They'll also get a free training course that's like pretty tough. And then they have like another one that's an easier, it's called Bodyweight Bodybuilding Intro. So it's like a beginner version to my bodyweight bodybuilding course. So that's a great place for people to start. We have great YouTube videos, lot to learn on YouTube. So dig into the YouTube channel. All my socials are Z Even-Esh, so pretty easy to find. And that's it, man. I love hopping on the podcast with you. You have great questions, so it makes it easy to have a great conversation.
Man, well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you and your time. And yeah, man, we're gonna have to get you back for a part 2 sometime. So hey, if you're listening to this, everything is gonna be
Part 2.
down in the show notes. Check it out. Appreciate it, Zach. Thank you so much for your time and much love.
Thank you.